Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our second coffee and conversation of the fall 2020 semester. I'm excited to have you all with us today. A couple of announcements before we get started. First, if you didn't have a chance to sign in as we were waiting for folks to join the Zoom room, please be sure to do so. I'm going to continually put the sign in link in the chat just so you have a chance as you're joining to sign in and record your attendance. And we'll also use this for future communication regarding coffee and conversations and other opportunities coming out of the Advisor Academy. Again, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dana Saunders. If this is your first coffee and conversation, I'm excited to have you with us today. I'm the director of the Students First Office in the Division of Student Success, and just this semester took over responsibility for the Advisor Academy and Coffee and Conversation. So excited to work with you and continue to work with many of you in that capacity as well. Today, we're excited to welcome Jennifer Whitney actually back to our Coffee and Conversation series. Those of you who participated last year will remember that Dr. Whitney last joined us in January in a discussion about the state of mental health on our campus. And she is back by overwhelming demand. Many of you asked specifically for a follow-up in a survey that I did at the very beginning of the fall semester, and we're very interested in sort of a follow-up, particularly within the context of COVID, and wanting to talk further about how to best support students, particularly when we are doing much of our work remotely and via a virtual platform. As a reminder, I'm recording the session today for folks who aren't able to join us this morning. So just full disclosure there. And if you're interested in going back and viewing any parts of our session today, you'll have an opportunity to do that. I'll share the link to the recording once we finish today. And I think last but not least, we are working on at least one more coffee and conversation. I'd like to have one more likely in early December. Still trying to narrow down the topic for that. There's been lots of good ideas presented thus far, but if you've got a specific interest or topic, particularly that makes sense for that particular point in the term, please feel free to put it in the chat. Send it to me individually via a private chat, or email is fine too, but always welcome to your ideas. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Whitney here in just a minute. We'll have some opening remarks for her, and I know there'll be lots of opportunity for follow-up questions and conversation after she finishes. You are more than welcome to unmute yourself and ask your questions directly to the group. I'll also be monitoring the chat if you'd prefer to put it there. So again, thanks for joining us. And without further ado, Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And all right, Dana, can you see a slideshow? Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
okay, awesome. I have 3 screens, and so I'm always like, are you seeing the right one? All right, so for those of you who I have not met before, who I do not know, I'm Jennifer Whitney. I'm the director of the Counseling Center here at the university, and we are the primary mental health providers for our students. We do a variety of services, including groups and workshops, case management, psychiatry services, counseling services, but we also really think about serving, so all those things I just mentioned, we would look at kind of as direct service, right? Working kind of one-on-one or in a group setting with students who are seeking out our services. But certainly the Counseling Center also really thinks about the community as a whole, right? And how do we create to best serve our students. And so that's really where I'll be coming from today, this idea of taking care of ourselves in order to take care of others, right? And I think because in particular of kind of the space we're in right now, you know, the pandemic of racial terror and our current health crisis, our public health crisis, our contentious political system and our elections. I think before we think about taking care of our students, we have to take care of ourselves. And I know sometimes folks can feel like, oh, that's so selfish, or, that's not the order of things. We're here for our students. And without a doubt, 100% we are. But if we are not well, if we are not taking care of ourselves, we have nothing left to give. So that's the spirit of what I will be talking about today. Many of you are probably familiar with the Chancellor's use of the phrase shared fate, our work at UNCG. And I think shared fate is just the perfect phrase to frame how we think about caring for ourselves, again, our own mental health and well-being, and how that's connected to the mental health and the well-being of our students. And before the pandemic, when I would talk to groups, I used to give talks about students in distress, and I would focus on what are the signs of distress and how do you support students who are in distress? What does intervention look like? And maybe there would be one slide on self-care. But just as COVID has flipped our world on its head, I've flipped this presentation on its head, right? To really first focus on taking care of ourselves in order to really look at the mental health of our entire community, right? Not just our students. And as I said before, we're not dealing with just the COVID-19 pandemic. As a country, we've been dealing with the pandemic of racial terror and violence and injustice for the past 400 plus years, and the continued violence against and murder of Black and Brown folks in our communities. Risings really intersect with our community's mental health. Again, I think the Chancellor's phrase of shared fate says it all when we think about the intersection of racial equity and mental health and well-being for our community members. I'm going to be using the word we a lot. I'm going to be using the word community a lot in our time today together. And when I say we, I'm talking about staff members, I'm talking about faculty, I'm talking about our students, I'm talking about literally everyone in this UNCG community. So what I'm saying applies just as much to you as advisors or staff members or faculty as it does to the students and the students that we all serve. So for those of us who've flown on a plane, probably not in a long time, or perhaps if you haven't flown on a plane, you've seen on TV the speech where the flight attendant instructs passengers and she or he says, "In the event of a decompression, an oxygen mask will automatically appear in front of you." And then they tell you how to put the mask on properly, right? And they show you and demonstrate. And then they say, "If you're traveling with a child or someone who requires assistance, secure your mask first and then assist the other person." And I think this is just a beautiful analogy for caring for our own mental health so that we can care for those around us and hopefully, kind of remove that idea of, oh, it's selfish to prioritize me, right? As a mom of 3 kiddos, I'm always caught by this statement on the airplane and how hard these directions would be to follow. And certainly as a helper, as community members, as just supporting humans, caring humans, it often, again, seems right and natural and your instinct to put others first. But I also know that as a mom to those 3 kiddos, that if I'm not okay, if on that plane, if in crisis, I don't put my oxygen mask on first, I cannot help them. I cannot protect them. I cannot support them. It's not selfish. It is crucial that we take care of ourselves, that we pay attention to our own mental health. The other thing about taking care of ourselves, like really paying attention to our own mental health and well-being, is that unlike garnering expertise in your content area, right? Biology, advising, or gaining skills for your specific position at the university, When we work to increase our training in mental health and wellness, when we are thinking about how do we support students in distress, there is a component of the work that's experiential. Of course, we have to develop the knowledge and the skills, but we also have to have awareness and insight. We have to pay attention to our own mental health, our own well being. And so that insight and awareness of ourselves matters. And that's part of what makes this work so difficult, and part of what can make it really difficult to support our students who are in distress, right? So, thinking about an example, if we struggle with anxiety, and it's not well managed, being around an anxious student is really difficult. It heightens our own anxiety. Maybe it creates our own irritability. We might be irritable with the student that we're trying to help because of this like anxiety feedback loop. And certainly the increase in just the volume and intensity of students and their stories, and their stories of trauma and distress, it affects us, right? We that soaks in. It affects our mental health and our well-being. And it's not just our students, right? Right now, in this time of social uprising, in the presence and legacy of the centuries of racial violence, of our public health crisis, of the election season, right? It's coming at us in all directions. And taking care of our own mental health, putting on that oxygen mask before helping someone else is essential. Now, all that to say, of course, you don't need to be a perfectly mentally well human, whatever that means, because perfection is an illusion. It's also a tool of oppression. It's a tool of internal oppression and external oppression. But having some working knowledge of self-care, really being able to check in on your own mental health, being able to put on your oxygen mask and have awareness of where you're at really is the first step. I think that one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves and others is that it's natural to feel stress and anxiety and grief and sadness during, a disaster or a trauma, right? There is a psychological toll as a result of our current new normal. Many of us are working and we're living online. We're really missing the human contact. We're missing our regular rituals, our routines. We're uncertain about, these new rituals and routines that we've developed this fall. Are they going to last? How long will they last? There's still a possibility that we will close for the fall. Knock on wood. I don't have any wood around, but what is spring going to look like, right? Like things are ever changing. And we, right, staff members, students, faculty, all of us, we often tell ourselves that our reaction to stress or crisis is not normal or that it should be different, particularly with a crisis that we are currently experiencing, right? We're going on month 7, so it feels like I should be adjusted to this by now. Like I should be used to this. This is the new normal. Like, why am I still tired? Why am I still foggy? The reality is most likely that all of our reactions are very normal in a very abnormal situation. And our current reality, right, the COVID-19 pandemic, the pandemic of racial violence, racism, it's worldwide, right? It's not just specific to our community here at UNCG. It is a shared crisis, and there's something to that, that the ways that we are connected in these crises, but it certainly is not experienced or shared equally, right? We're all in the same storm, but we're certainly not all in the same boat. And the feelings we're having aren't just about what has happened, right, over the last spring or over the summer. It's not just about what's currently happening, today, tomorrow, next week, but it's also really mired in anticipatory grief. What is still to come? Again, that idea, gosh, we could still go online this fall. Like we haven't made it to the end. What will spring look like? When are we going to have a vaccine? How long will this last? Um, What will the outcome of the election be? How long will it be before we know the outcome of the election? You know, will there be violence? There's so many unanswered questions. They really are endless. And it creates, pardon my expression, a shit ton of anxiety. Anxiety lives, though, in the future, which is part of what makes it so difficult to address, right? We can't do anything about the future except worry about it. And the only really true antidote to anxiety, that future worry, is to truly live in the present. One of my clients shared this wonderful phrase from her grandma. And I swear if I learn to like needlepoint or something, I'm going to make myself a pillow for my office. But worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. Feel free to write it down. But as Dana said, it's being recorded. You can hear that again. Worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. So again, I'm here to tell you what we're all experiencing. It is normal. A colleague of mine in the counseling center, Kristen Norden, if you know her, she shared that, you know, she just feels like her brain is scrambled eggs. For me, my closest experience is it feels like I have pregnancy brain. Like when I accidentally set my blender on my stove and then turned the burner on and set it on fire, right? Like that's not normally something I would do, right? But it's this brain fog, COVID brain fog, you'll hear folks call it. And so in the midst of all these feelings, in the midst of COVID brain fog, we're also really working hard to learn so many new things, right? All these new technologies, for example. And we're working really hard to think about our work and our world in new and creative ways, right? Like this coffee and conversations. Okay, I want to support students in distress. I've always wanted to do that, but now I want to do that in this new and creative way. And how do I do it in this virtual world? Right? And then we're also constantly being bombarded by new and ever-changing information. And the information that we're getting is not black and white. It's filled with a ton of uncertainty. And so, you know, whether it is that we're learning how to live an anti-racist life and enact change in our community, or it's figuring out how to change the background in our Zoom, this is all really hard. And all of these symptoms that you see on your slide, the brain fog, the fatigue, the forgetfulness, the mindlessness, you know, just Monday, I totally missed a meeting that was at 2 that I thought was at 4:30. I went on at 4:30 and saw an email that said, hey, where are you? Yeah, it was an email from 2. It's normal. And I hope that seeing them here in print or on this slide allows you to be a little bit more gentle with yourself and less judgmental of where you're at and how you are coping. I hope it provides you with some space to extend that generosity of spirit, that compassion to those around us, right? So being compassionate to me when I didn't show up for that 2 o'clock meeting. None of us is at our best right now. And all of us are doing our best. But as I shared earlier, while this certainly is a worldwide trauma, a shared crisis, it's certainly not experienced or shared equally. For marginalized and oppressed folks, the pandemic of racism intersects with our public health crisis, right? We know that COVID-19 is disproportionately affecting communities of color, and it's really shining a glaring spotlight on our health disparities, physical health and mental health. And again, we all may be in the same storm, but we are certainly not in the same boat. And for me, as a white, cisgendered, employed woman, I acknowledge, you know, the unearned generational and situational privilege gained through centuries of white supremacy culture that has actively marginalized and brutalized and murdered communities of color. So, whew, at this point, you might be thinking, perhaps even sarcastically, irritably thinking, okay, Jen, thanks, great. Thanks for acknowledging your privilege. Thanks for acknowledging that it's normal and for highlighting all this really difficult, painful stuff. Yeah, thanks a lot. Now tell me how to change it. Tell me how to make all these icky feelings that I don't like go away. Tell me how to clear the brain fog. Tell me how to make this better for our students. Well, if you're familiar with the children's book, Going on a Bear Hunt, we can't go over it and we can't go under it. We've got to go through it. And that is such an important reminder for each of us and for our students, right? When they come to us in distress and they want things to be better and we want to fix things for them, we can't go over it and we can't go under it. But there are tools we can use to move through it. So being thoughtful and intentional and reflective can really help us move through and ride these emotions. They really are waves, instead of fighting them or judging them or pushing against them, right? Living so close to the ocean, I imagine that many of us have been to the beach, have swam in the ocean, and know a thing or two about the riptide, right? You can't fight it. You can't fight it. You have to go with it. And emotions are just like that. So, some other ways to move through them: get outside. We need the vitamin D from the sunshine. I think it's coming out today. It was so very foggy this morning, but hopefully we'll get some sunshine. Exercise, but don't pressure yourself about it, right? Being active and moving your body, it should be enjoyable. Dance parties and, walks with friends. It shouldn't be guilt-ridden or like punishment. Certainly try to eat a variety of foods that fuel your body, right? We need lots of different minerals and nutrients. But again, don't pressure yourself about it. Do what you can and keep it simple. I love eating a delicious spinach and strawberry salad, right? Super simple, just some spinach leaves, some cut up strawberries, some dressing. But I only eat it if somebody else makes it for me. So, just no pressure. Certainly know that emotions will run high and patience will run low when people spend a lot of time together, right? There's a lot of irritability right now, a lot of angst. I know in my house, at least one of us cries daily, and that's not always the children. So throughout your day, pause and breathe. Pause and breathe before you check your email. Pause and breathe before you take a drink of water. Pause and breathe before you turn out the light and move to another room. Pause and breathe and repeat. And then after you've practiced, and it is a practice, pausing and breathing, move to pausing and noticing. Check in with yourself. Notice how your forehead and your eyes and your jaw are feeling. Are they clenched and scrunched? Sometimes after a really intense session with a client, I really have to shake out my face because I notice I've been scrunched the whole time. Or are you loose? It's really helpful. I'm gonna yawn for you. Hopefully it'll induce you to yawn. Oh. I've noticed yawning is contagious even over Zoom. Yawning is a great way to increase the oxygen to your brain, to loosen up your jaw. Then notice how you're holding your neck and your shoulders. How close are your shoulders to your ears, right? You want them to comfortably be as far apart as possible. And then notice, are you slouched, right? We're all hovering over our keyboards, over our screens, right? Open up your heart and your chest. Check in with your heart and your chest. Are they feeling closed and tight and achy? Or are they feeling open and light? Check in with your arms and your legs, and your fingers and your toes and your feet. Maybe roll your neck. What's going on with your gut, with your hips, right? Notice your breath. Is it shallow, like right up in your chest? Is it quick? Or is it going all the way down to your tummy, to your abdomen? Is it deep and slow? And just like the pausing and the breathing, right? Do this often. One of the great things we can do is set an alarm at the top of every hour and check in with ourselves. Where are we at? What do we need? You know, would stepping outside be helpful? Would certainly just drinking a glass of water be helpful? Pause, breathe, notice, listen, and repeat. And I say listen, right? Emotions, feelings, the way our body feels, those are messages, right? We need to listen to them. The more you practice this, the more automatic it will become. The more you practice this, the easier it will be to share with someone else who's struggling, right? Whether it's a coworker or a student you're working with. Pause, breathe, notice. Take a beat before taking the next step, right? We have to calm our nervous system. We're all working out of a trauma brain right now. We're operating in a fight, flight, or freeze, like consistently right now. We've got to find ways to calm our sympathetic nervous system so that we can activate our parasympathetic nervous system, right? The thing about emotions, people often think they, exist just in our heads or in our hearts, but really our nervous system goes all the way to our fingers, our toes. When we have an emotion, when we have a feeling, it's everywhere, right? That's why we just did that body scan, right? That's why you say I have butterflies in my stomach, right? When you're nervous, the nervous thoughts are up here, but the same transmitters, the same neurons, they're happening all over our nervous system, right? We need to calm that sympathetic nervous system, activate our parasympathetic nervous system so that we can really balance our feelings and our emotions with our thinking, right? We don't want to eliminate either one. We want to blend them together. In the counseling world, we call that wise mind, when you've got your emotions and your feelings and your thinking all on board, because it's all information. It's all good stuff. It all sends messages to us. I hope so far that there have been nuggets that you can take away from our time together, nuggets for yourself, nuggets for your students. But I've saved some of my personal favorites for the end. And again, you might want to just grab a piece of paper and a pen or open up your phone and jot some down, because again, this is good stuff. I'm telling you, these are golden nuggets. So here it is. Comparison is the thief of joy. I say this to at least one person, at least once a day. But really, in the age of social media, I could say it just about to every person, including myself, every day, every moment, right? So many of you who are on social media have probably seen something like this posted somewhere, Facebook, Instagram. You should come out of this with a new skill. You should really, during this time, oh my gosh, we have all this extra time because we're at home, and, just really, you should, tackle those projects you haven't had time for before. Maybe you really should write that novel that you've been meaning to write. Try new recipes, get back to cooking, maybe learn a new language, right? Should. So in the biz, not showbiz, but therapy biz, we call that shoulding on yourself. It's a form of emotionally and cognitively pooping on yourself. It's not pretty, figuratively or literally, to poop on yourself. So as we move through this time of uncertainty, keep things simple. Like I said before, right? Maybe learning to quilt is possible for you. Maybe that's something that you're going to do during quarantine or during COVID. But really, maybe just getting up and showering each morning is where it's at and what's important to you in order to maintain a routine, right? Without a doubt, growth will happen whether we want it to or not, right? I shared the slide earlier about the stages of grief. And that last stage of grief, even though it's not a linear, that last stage really is acceptance, right? In which we make meaning of the trauma or of the loss, right? And there's also something that exists in the literature that's called post-traumatic growth, in which after a trauma, people report that they actually have improvements in their relationships. They have more gratitude and appreciation for life, that they maybe have a greater sense of their own personal strength and ability to cope with a crisis, right? So eventually, the hope is that we can find meaning in our struggle and that we can really get us a greater sense of our own strength and appreciation for life and relationships. But if you're not there yet, it's okay. This is another little nugget I want to leave at your feet today. It's up to you if you pick it up, but focus on the things that you can control, right? This is called the internal locus of control. So often, our irritability, our frustration, our anxiety is the result of trying to control someone else or something else, right? That we actually don't have control over. That might be the choices your students make. That might be whether or not the man at the grocery store, has his mask over his nose or just over his mouth, or maybe, is just wearing the chin mask. And I'm not saying we shouldn't care about those things, and I'm not saying we shouldn't hold each other accountable, right? Again, we are a community, right? This is a public health, a communicable disease, a community crisis, right? But we need to always return to and focus on those things we actually can control. So maybe you can control saying something to the man in the grocery store, but you can't control what he does with that information. Now, certainly, as I've said many times today, what we're experiencing is normal, but that does not mean that we have to experience it alone, or that if we just exercise and eat right, we can handle it. So we need to be paying attention to our feelings and emotions, right? I've said that as well. We need to understand they're normal. We need to know that we can't just get rid of them, and actually maybe even push ourselves to acknowledge that we don't want to get rid of those emotions, right? They're useful information. They're helpful tools. But as I said before, there are tools to help you move through those emotions that we can't get over, right? So we certainly want to reach out to a mental health professional anytime we think we need to, or that we think it would be helpful, right? So up on the screen, you see some, kind of signs or questions you might ask yourself or a student that would help you arrive at the decision of, gosh, maybe I need something more, right? And of course, we really want to know and use our resources. One of the things I love about working here is that we have so many, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many resources on campus, which is wonderful, but can also be overwhelming. So I always just say the Dean of Students is a one-stop shop, right? So if you're like, I know that there's help out there for my student, but I don't know where to send them, and I don't want to, just send them on a wild goose chase, send them to the Dean of Students, and the Dean of Students will connect them to where they need to be connected and find the supports. The other cool thing about the Dean of Students office is, sometimes we might hear just one part of a student's story, but the Dean of Students can kind of figure out what it looks like in a more holistic way and offer them additional supports maybe that they didn't even know they needed or didn't know were available. I know in the past I've challenged all of us to take the Ask, Listen, and Refer suicide prevention and mental health training online. It's brief 20 to 30 minute online training. And we actually just got a grant, a $25,000 grant from central office to bring in QPR, which is kind of the next level of suicide prevention and training. It stands for Question, Persuade, and Refer. So I'll be coming back to you and challenging you to do QPR when it's available. And for those of you who are teaching a course this fall, I know that this syllabus statement was actually pushed through as part of the COVID-19 syllabus statement, which I was so super excited about. And I think, you know, including this really helps to center mental health and well-being in your classes, and really delivers a message to your students from the jump that this is important and meaningful, and has a huge impact on academic success, right? Again, all of these things intersect and are connected. Also want to point out that there are a lot of resources specific to mental health and our present reality during COVID. So if you go on website, there is a specific link that says COVID and your mental health, and it has lots of resources and things that you could direct your students to, activities, guides, suggestions. There are a lot of online resources. And then we also developed a staff and faculty guide, which if you went into UNCG to the search box and just simply typed in culture of care, this website right here would come up. And there are a ton of resources around anxiety and depression and the trauma brain, and you know what learning is looking like right now for students. There's information about racial trauma. There's information about a variety of trainings. There are actually, you know, kind of brief centering and mindfulness activities, right, that you could engage in, with your students, or that you could suggest that your students do on their own. And then certainly as you know, don't forget that we have this resource of ComPsych, right? We get free sessions through ComPsych. And they can also connect us with community resources. Last but not least, I want to, we have lots of workshops going on in the Counseling Center, but certainly as we hit the home stretch, we know that stress is a really big one for students. And so we have a 3-part series that students can join in starting next Friday for the following 3 Fridays to develop strategies for managing that stress and anxiety here at the end of the semester. We also this Friday and next Friday have some specific support drop-in groups around the election. And there is on our website also an election stress toolkit, which it's grounded in the election right now, but really, again, it is a toolkit that applies to stress in general. And there's a lot of hyperlinks on that that really, again, are actual things that you could engage in and do, your students could engage in and do online. So again, thinking about this virtual world, there are lots of resources that are available to us online. All right. That is it for the presentation portion of today. I was trying to get us pull up our website. All right, here. So here's the Counseling Center Election Stress Kit. It's a PDF. And again, you know, it's grounded in the election, but it is about managing stress and anxiety in general, right? Unplugging, being present, refueling, connecting, doing something. And then if you go down each section, you know, there are hyperlinks. So check out this video for, you know, ideas for unplugging. Here are some exercises. Here's mindfulness walk. You know, here's some videos about mindfulness. Listen to some nature and Tibetan singing bowls, right? So again, these are things that you can point your students to, or you could do over a Zoom call with a student, right? If they were, you know, kind of amped up and agitated, and really kind of centering them first, right? Breathing, stopping, centering would help then for you all to be able to do the advising that you're going to do. Of course, don't forget about our Spartan Open Pantry. Today and tomorrow is the last day to go to Dunkin' Donuts and get that that Spartan donut. Connecting, and certainly, right, this is one of the things that's hardest, because in this pandemic, right, normally we would tell people, go to your support system, you know, find folks, be with folks, spend time with people. And of course, the options for that are limited right now. And so, but there are ways to connect, right? And figuring out what those are and how to do those. There are just, folks have really put out all of these amazing support groups beyond what it is that we're doing at the counseling center. And then certainly, you know, doing something, right? Taking action makes us feel good. It makes us feel empowered when we're feeling helpless or hopeless. And then again, we have a ton of resources on our campus. All right. So, questions, clarifications, ideas.
Jen, while people are formulating their question, I'll start us off. I think a lot of times we're spending a lot of time worrying about our students, and I appreciated what you said about worrying's like a rocking chair. It doesn't get us very far, or doesn't get us anywhere. So I'm curious, you touched on this just a little bit, but maybe for an opportunity to expand a bit more. Do you have recommendations for how academic advisors can introduce a quick check-in with students, you know, within sort of the parameters or time constraints of what can be anywhere from like a 20-minute to a 45-minute advising session, in a way that kind of respects the boundaries of us as academic advisors? We're not mental health professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And also knowing, you know, the appointment exists for a very specific kind of reason, but there may be, you know, it's still an opportunity to do a check-in with students and sort of have a slightly different conversation. Do you have recommendations for how we can even introduce that topic without being intrusive and sort of stepping outside the bounds of our areas of expertise?
Yeah, and again, I really think kind of going back to that idea of, you know, practicing this ourselves, right, then brings it more natural. And you know, we as mental health professionals, we don't have, you know, some, you know, claim on mindfulness, right? Like that is way bigger than the mental health professionals. And certainly, you know, we're not asking you or saying that you should diagnose or treat, right? But this website that I talked about before, that is the Culture of Care website with guidance for faculty and staff. Actually, if you go down, right here, integrate well-being practices into your classes. Well, of course, this would be into your advising sessions, right? But here's a 30-second guided breathing, a 2-minute guided breathing, right? So kind of when you're thinking about those time constraints, it does not have to be long, right? I know when I was talking to you guys, when I just said pause and breathe that first time, like I slowed down, like I'd been just talking, and I just slowed down. And I think, you have to do it in a way that feels comfortable or natural to you. But I think, just saying, hey, I'm trying something new. I know that we're all experiencing a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. And one of the things that's been helping me is just kind of to start each meeting by really just, stopping and breathing and centering myself. I wonder if that's something that we could do together, and make it an offer. And see if the student agrees or not, right? So that it is, consensual. And then if they say, okay, okay, great, let's just pause and breathe, or let's do a body scan, like I had us do before, about checking in with the different parts of our body, or turn to, somebody else to do it for you, right? It can be really nice, particularly if you get caught up in your thoughts, to be directed by somebody else. So yeah, those are my, does that help? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that's great. There's also a really relatable question in the chat from Sydney, and she asks, what are your suggestions for managing what is referred to as spewing when students come to you out of the blue in a panic and you're unprepared or incapable of providing them the time or empathy that they're seeking right at that moment?
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah. Spewing is, I call it verbal vomit, right? They just kind of just vomit all over you. And I think in that, it really is dependent on the context, right? But part of what I'm hearing is, there's not time to really, give this person a 45-minute session, right? And so I really think if you could do just the deep breathing, or just the, kind of acknowledge there's a lot happening. I can hear, that you've got a lot going on. I want you to get what you need, and I can't give you what you need right now. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to just maybe do some deep breathing and calming with you, right? I'll stop sharing so I can do. I'm going to turn off this green screen because it's you don't always see. Something that I like to teach folks is this brain as a fist, right? And so there are really 3 parts of our brain. This is, really kind of our reptilian brain, right? And down here, there are no words. Reptiles have no words. They have no feelings, right? Down here. And then our thumb, we bring online, this is our mammalian brain, right? This is all of our emotions. This is where our crises exist, our emotional crises exist. And then this is our human brain, right? We bring online our human brain. This is our prefrontal cortex and all the thinking. Right. And certainly, and I talked about COVID fog and COVID brain and trauma brain before. And again, on that faculty and staff culture of care guide, we put in information about trauma brain as well. But when somebody comes to you and they're spewing, they're here. Right. And so really what you want to do in a very short amount of time is try to calm them down, right? And bring back online the thinking brain just a little bit, right? But if somebody comes to you and they're spewing, you can't come back at them with a thinking brain, right? So this is something to really, like, again, when we think about, it's important to check in your own mental health. Where are you at, right? Different brain states, they don't talk to each other. Right. So for those of us who have kids, we know that particularly when our child is in the grocery store, lying on the floor, yelling, screaming, crying, and having a fit, right? Like saying, I know you really want that lollipop, but mama doesn't have the money to buy it right now, right? Like coming at the child with words and cognitions and logic, not going to do a damn bit of good, right? We have to first bring the mammalian brain back on, and then the human brain, right? So if somebody comes to you spewing, really, you can't problem solve there anyways. Even if you had 45 minutes, you couldn't problem solve. So really, when somebody is spewing, it's just about validating that and then trying to calm that sympathetic nervous system so we can bring the parasympathetic back, right? And so I know I keep saying and going back to these ideas of these mindfulness or the breathing, but that's really where you would be. And then you would acknowledge, like, I want to give you more. Unfortunately, right now, I can't. What I can give you is let's just calm ourselves and get you someplace that you can get your needs met.
Other questions from anyone in the group this morning? Jen, can you talk to us a little bit about Zoom fatigue and sort of some recommendations, maybe even that the counseling center staff is using to circumvent that, since I know you all are primarily offering, or, meeting with students virtually, just like the advisors are on campus. Many, particularly professional advisors, and particularly this time of year, we're often in back to back to back to back Zoom meetings with students, sharing our cameras and that kind of thing. And it's not necessarily easy for us to take a break from that because we still need to see and meet the students' advising and registration needs. But are there ways or recommendations you have for that?
Well, certainly one of the things we're doing in the counseling center is, not every, and I don't know this about advising, Dana, but not every conversation needs to happen over Zoom, right? So like, it's great that, the webcam and this technology is available, but there are lots of sessions with our clients that we will do over the phone, and really just not have this Zoom camera, right? Like, part of that fatigue is that you're pinpointed in such a narrow way, right? You're staring. We know about all the lights that come off of the screens, right? Another thing that I think is really helpful is, if it's possible, to put your computer by like a window or something behind you where you can move your eyes and get a bigger, right? Because that's, again, part of the Zoom fatigue, is this narrow focus. But when we're in person, one of the things that we do is we look around the room, and we gaze at different things that are different distances, right? And that relieves some of that pressure and stress on our eyes and our brains. But with the camera and the computer, we don't have that. So I think I tell students sometimes too, like, hey, I'm going to be looking around the room because it actually helps me focus. It actually helps me hear you better, right? If I'm staring at you, it's not going to be good for either one of us, right? And I think students get that, right? Because I know that's what they're doing, right? Oftentimes I'm the one that's like feeling this need to give all this attention to this little square, and they're, doing different things in their rooms, or, their cameras aren't even on. And again, I don't know, how this fits for advising, but, certainly turning cameras off, right? If you can do it, do it. Just because we have the technology doesn't mean we have to use it.
Other questions this morning that would be helpful for your own self-care or connecting students to resources on campus?
Jen, I have a question.
Yeah.
So in the past, normally if we're meeting with students face to face and we want to connect them to campus resource or something like that, we normally would sometimes walk them over. How would you suggest we connect them virtually when we're in this kind of climate that we're in now?
Yeah, that's great. I know that's one of those things where it's like you have to do this extra mental energy to even figure out like who's doing what and how. If it's the counseling center in particular, all folks have to do is call us, and the front desk will then connect them with a therapist. And we realize for a lot of our students that using the phone is a barrier. And so in the same way that maybe you used to walk with them, right, to kind of reduce that barrier and help them get where they needed to be, actually making that call with them could be really helpful. This generation has more phone phobia than previous generations. And most of, at least within this division of student affairs, really we are operating primarily out of that call first. There are some folks who have the drop-in groups or the drop-in meetings or the chat features. But really I would suggest, making that call with them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It sounds like our questions are maybe winding down, but I'll give it just a few more minutes in case you're still sort of formulating that.
I'll say too, there are so many apps on our phones. One of the cool technologies is there are chat bots that students can interact with. So again, students don't necessarily like to talk to people on the phone at that first time, but there is technology where they can chat with it is a robot, so it's important for students to know that it's artificial intelligence. But again, for some students, being able to text with someone can be really helpful, or even if that someone is a robot. And then there are tons of apps. They all have like buy-ins once you get into the app, but they usually have free versions of all of this kind of mindfulness stuff and this breathing. So yeah, again, tons of resources in this technology age, which is cool. And it doesn't mean that it's a replacement for the in-person. It just means it's additive and helpful. Oh, Woebot, that's who it is. I was trying to think who the chat bot is. Woebot, WOEBOT. And actually, if students, so we have, if students go on and register as a UNCG student, if they get in distress, they'll receive UNCG resources specific if they register with Woebot as a UNCG student.
All right, well, it sounds like we'll wrap up there today. Jim, thank you so much for joining us and giving your time. I think you gave some really helpful tips and resources, not only so that we can remember to take care of ourselves first and foremost, but so that we can do a better job at taking care of our students. A couple final reminders. I'll just remind folks that our next coffee and conversation is coming up on November 18th. So if you haven't had a chance to register for that, please feel free to do so. I'll be sending out calendar invites shortly. And one last prompt to, if you haven't already, please be sure to sign in so we know you were here today. Jen, thanks again. Thanks to all of you for joining us, and we'll see you at the next Coffee and Conversation.
Bye, y'all. Have a good day.